I actually think that it's a very, very valuable piece to a puzzle, but it is not the only piece to the puzzle. One of the main problems with the way that we talk about it is that self-love is most often framed as a feeling. In my humble opinion, self-respect is actually what needs to come first. So when self-love is referred to or framed as being a feeling, feelings are inconsistent. And I don't have to convince you of that. Today, you may feel really happy. Tomorrow, you wake up not so happy, right? So it's inconsistent. And so if we look at self-love as a feeling or a way of feeling about ourself, if it could be dependent upon the day. It could be dependent upon our emotional state, and it becomes unstable. And that is an issue for our internal dialogue and how we see it for ourselves. So I think that when you look at maybe reframing it, I think that self-respect is actually the first pillar or the first piece to the puzzle. Self-respect, we don't talk about it a lot, right? But self-respect looks a lot like boundaries. It looks a lot like standards, follow through, what you're willing to tolerate, what level of your capacity or energy you're willing to give to a person, place, thing, relationship. And it's measurable. And I think that self-love is aspirational and it also is subjective. So without self-respect, self-love becomes and can become, I should say, very performative. And I've seen that in a lot of instances when individuals talk about self-love. It is almost like this very fairy, idealistic concept that appears to be inauthentic and performative. And so I think that like affirmations and your self-care routines and the language about worth can coexist in the self-respect conversation. I think that self-respect also kind of helps us evaluate. And again, I said earlier, it's measurable because it helps us evaluate mistreatment, self-abandonment, chronic overextension, or what I like to call overfunctioning in your relationships, personal or professional. And so for me, self-respect regulates your behavior. And it's not so much as a performance as much as it is an alignment and an attunement with yourself and what you want and need and have capacity for. We took self-love and put it over here, and we took self-respect and put it over here, and we wanted to divide it in a column, right? And we wanted to make a structured distinction of what they look like when they're lined up next to each other. I would say that self-love is your emotional state. It's your compassion towards yourself. It's acceptance of your imperfections and your own internal affirmation. All great things, all necessary things. And again, the both and self-respect is more about a behavioral standard. So for example, not even so much a behavioral standard of other people also. That yes, but also your own behavioral standard. how do I want to show up in the world? How do I, when someone says my name in a room full of people that know me, what do I want them to say about my character? What do I want them to say about how I behave, how I show up? So again, behavioral standard, clear boundaries, self-respect helps you set clear boundaries. And no matter what anybody says, boundaries are necessary for every relationship that you have in your life. Personal, professional, partnership, like whether you're, married, unmarried, but you're in a, you're dating, friendships, all of it. You need clear boundaries. And self-love, again, if we line them up, that does not help you set clear boundaries. Self-love is internal. Self-respect is internal, but also extends out external as well. Another thing I would say is your alignment, your personal alignment with your values. And then also being able to see where your values align with other people so that you can choose your connections and your relationships wisely. The final piece to self-respect would be a tolerance for discomfort in varied situations where like your integrity possibly could come into question. For example, if you're in a room full of friends and one of the friends leaves and they're being gossiped or talked about behind their back in a non-loving way, that would be one of those times. Your self-respect would kick in and say, yeah, not with it. Not gonna do it. I'm not gonna laugh at that joke about that person because that's not how I wanna show up. That's not the type of friend that I am. And for me, when I made that distinction between self-respect and self-love and actually decided that both have a place in my life and can coexist, self-respect came a lot easier to kind of align myself with first, because truthfully, I wasn't showing up the way that I wanted to show up. I wasn't the greatest about, honoring some commitments or, speaking up when, a situation wasn't, integral or, all of that. I would kind of just be quiet and inside, kind of just let it fester inside. And I'm not saying that you need to like start fires everywhere, but there is a place where like, if something doesn't align and your integrity is just, you feel icky being associated with it, with that type of a setup or situation, that self-respect is what's going to help you walk away. That self-respect is what's going to help you stand up and say, you guys can handle it however you want. That's not how I move. I'm not comfortable with that. And then you separate yourself or however you get out of that. And I think that once I was able to be someone that I could respect, because again, yes, you want other people outside of yourself to respect you. That's all fine and great. But I want to respect myself. I want to be a person that I can respect. And once I became a person that I could respect, I became a person that I could love. Self-respect and self-love coexist. They can coexist. But you have to be the person that you can respect before you can become the person that you love. Because what exactly am I loving about myself if my integrity is all out of whack? And if I don't hold myself accountable for showing up in the world with values that align with who I am. You can do a lot of self-love stuff without a lot of self-reflection. self-respect requires self-reflection. I don't know a person that respects themselves that hasn't like went into some period of like evaluating themselves. I know I called myself into question a lot, and I give myself permission to question myself when I'm acting out of alignment with my values and my character. But now it's become a well-oiled machine. Doesn't mean I don't have like little mess ups here and there, but like it's become such a well-oiled machine now to the point where if somebody presents me with an opportunity business-wise and it sounds great to the ear, I don't know, I'm at the point where if I get a gut check, I don't do it, no matter what, because it doesn't align. And that is always my answer, is that doesn't align. And for me, everything has to align with my values, with how I want to show up in the world, how I want people to see me. And I also don't want people to see me differently than how I actually am. And that is a huge, huge thing for me. Like, so I'll kind of explain or elaborate on that a little bit. Like, you know, I talk a lot about deconstructing my religious trauma and things like that, and like the spiritual abuse. And one of the things that like scared me more than anything when I was growing up is the fear of being a hypocrite. And I never ever wanted to be one way to this group of people and another way to this group of people. And I was very scared of that as a youngster, although I was like that way. The thing that I feared the most, I became. Because like I felt like in a religious system, I couldn't really be myself. In its truest expression. There was always some part of me that I was like editing and hiding. And so for me, I would say like, that's also huge. It's a huge component to who I am is being who you get right now on this video is gonna say the exact same thing when I'm in a room full of my friends. And if my friends could come right here and sit and record this video and say the same things about me that I'm saying to you, then I've made it. Because it's what the people that are closer to you say about you, think about you, how you show up for them. And yeah, that's super important. I think to summarize the whole self-respect, self-love conversation up with a bow, I would do a practical reframe. And I would encourage anyone listening to this, before asking yourself the question, how do I love myself more? Maybe the better question is something like, where am I overriding my own limits? Where am I tolerating misalignment in my life? What standard am I unwilling to enforce? And finally, what commitment to myself have I broken? Because we all, yes, in some way have contributed to our own pain and our own suffering. And so when we self-reflect and we ask ourselves those questions, you have to understand that self-love becomes sustainable only when it is built on observable self-respect. This is Achea Red. Follow me on Instagram for more inspirational messages, or subscribe to my Substack or YouTube channel.